Welcome back. This is still MVA, Microsoft Virtual Academy, Jumpstart, and we're still talking about the modern web platform. I'm still Jeremy, this is still Michael, and here we go, Module 6 of 6, the very last one. Starting to get a little bit sad about the end.
I know, but I never thought I'd be so excited talking about libraries.
We are, in fact, going to be talking about libraries, yes. And this is, in my opinion, an essential topic to JavaScript because this is the whole strength of JavaScript. The coolest thing about JavaScript is that everybody writes JavaScript. And so everybody's already written what you're trying to write. I mean, for the most part, you know, you can count on the fact that what you're trying to do is it's written and it's checked into GitHub somewhere.
Yeah, and it was probably written by really smart people, too.
Like yourself. Like
yes.
yourself. Okay, so here's the module overview. We're going to be looking at my favorite first. Well, you know, anyway, I love WinJS. We're going to talk about that one very first. That seems like the most pertinent, and it's super cool. The last iteration was really exciting because they open sourced it, and there's all kinds of implications to that. Wish I could speak more to all the stuff down the pipe, but really exciting stuff in the space of WinJS. We're going to talk about a lot of these libraries. If you're new to this space, you're like, I've heard all of these, but I'm not sure exactly what they mean. We're going to talk about Underscore, Backbone, Knockout, jQuery, Angular, Bootstrap, and what the heck is D3?
All in less than an hour.
Well, D3 happens to be a little bit lateral to the others. It's not one of these primary frameworks, but man, it's cool, and I can't wait to show it to you. So cool. Let's dig right in. So first, WinJS. Now, let me clear something up. WinJS is not like an embedded library to Windows or an embedded framework or API within Windows. It's just a JavaScript library. It always has been. It's just that it was really easy to include it in your Windows apps, and it made everything, it kind of felt like it was embedded, but it never really was. And in fact, in the last iteration, the WinJS team, who Michael and I were just talking to yesterday, the WinJS team pulled it out entirely, said, let's make this sucker work on the web, on the public internet, and in all the other browsers, and let's open source it, by the way. So that's where we're at with WinJS. It's really exciting because WinJS attempts to do everything. I mean, it does a lot of stuff, and it's really cool. And so, and actually, right now, it's on the heavy side because it kind of all comes together. But in the next release, it's possible to just kind of take piecemeal and make just use different parts of it. So it's really cool because it just does so dang much that you'll find it useful. I'm positive. So what WinJS offers you is a whole bunch of stuff, but 4 things I'm going to highlight right now. First of all, if you're using it in a Windows app, it gives you easy access to WinRT. Now, WinRT is not difficult anyway, but there are some things in WinRT where you've kind of got to do 5 lines of code to go establish, create a manager and initialize something. And if in the scope of a JavaScript app, it just really doesn't need to be that involved, then WinJS kind of wraps it and makes it easier for you. So for instance, if you have resource strings in your app because you're being a good citizen and you're creating your app with multiple languages so that it's accessible to everybody, we'll talk about that more and you better stay tuned. If you're doing that and you need to pull a resource string from JavaScript instead of declaratively in your HTML, then in WinRT directly, you need to go create a resource manager, and you need to instantiate your string, determine your language, and do a few other things. In WinJS, it's just a resource get string. It's super duper simple, and that's the type of thing that it does for you. It wraps these things and makes them easier. So the next thing that WinJS does that I'm going to highlight is XHR, which has kind of always been an acronym for the XML HTTP request, an object that's built into all the cool browsers. And it's what we've been using for years to do AJAX, to get little messages back without changing the user's actual location in their browser. And the XHR method in WinJS, it's asynchronous and it's really good. It's really good at going out and getting things from the web, doing its own HTTP requests, coming back with the response and providing it to you. So it's a little bit like jQuery's getJSON object, or maybe the get object, because it's pretty powerful. So it's probably more analogous to the get object. So, and actually maybe not just the get, because it's able to do posts and whatever. So it's maybe more analogous to the AJAX object. So Anyway, XHR is really cool. I really like that method a lot. WinJS provides for us navigation and SPA. So it gives us this framework for rendering pages so that we don't have to navigate from one spot to another. We can really just do everything in the same page, keep all of our JavaScript in scope, and make life a lot simpler for us. A huge facility of WinJS is the UI controls. There's a lot of controls in WinJS, and they're more the flat design. They look right at home in a Windows 8 app, but when you put them on the web, they shine as well. It's kind of a modern concept anymore in the world of design, and so these controls are actually pretty great, very, very modern and very overwritable, customizable. It's pretty great. Okay, now in order to show off WinJS, I mean, it's being used all over in CodeShow, so it's kind of naturally all over the place. But what I want to do is I want to take you to a website that the WinJS team created in order to show it off. So I'm going to take you to try.buildwinjs.com. So we're going to jump out to the browser and go to try.buildwinjs.com, and that's going to take us here, the purple page. Okay, this is the try portion of build.win.js. And the cool thing that this does is kind of like CodeShow. It gives us a simple demo of all these UI features in WinJS, not just the UI features, some of the other ones as well. And then it shows us the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and the output of each of these. So,
Trying to copy CodeShow.
yeah, they're trying to copy CodeShow. So let's go ahead and pick one of these. Let's pick the ratings control. That's one of the really simple controls. All it does is it renders 5, in this case stars, but it can be overridden to render whatever image you want. It renders the stars, and it allows me to pick a rating. So I'm picking 5, I'm picking 3. I get to choose whatever I want. It's also able to tell me what the current value is, and that can be a real number, not just an integer, so it's able to render something like 3.4 here. So this is the rating control, and if I look at the HTML, you'll see that I'm including this div with a data win control, and then I'm specifying the rating, and then I'm giving it some options, like that the average rating is 3.4, and what I want to happen when the user clicks on it. Okay? That's the declaration. Notice the CSS doesn't say anything about it. Doesn't really need anything. And the JavaScript is also pretty light. There's not a whole lot that has to happen inside of this JavaScript. Okay, so for the most part, the rating control is declarative. It's something that happens just right here in your HTML. So that's the ratings control, but I want to show you a few of these other UI controls. Let me show you the list view. Here's the list view that's rendering a vertical list of items. These are just fruits. And if I go to the HTML, I'll be able to find the same type of pattern where I have a data-win-control. Do notice that this control that's being used here is an actual code editor. Notice over here on the right, it's showing me a map of my code. I've got my line numbers. And whenever I do something like a space in here, it's able to bring up, it's got language services. It's able to tell me what are some valid attributes in here. And in my JavaScript, it's able to tell me what are some valid things that I can type here. So pretty amazing. This is using a feature called Monaco that's pretty awesome. So now back to the HTML. Like I mentioned, this is using that standard control pattern where we basically just have a div. But it has a data win control value that is list view in this case, and then there are a number of options. List views are, they're a little bit more involved than just a ratings control, and there are all these options that we need to set, including where do you get your data, where do you find the template that we use to render each of those items? Do you want people to be able to select the things? So let me go ahead and set the layout. Instead of list layout, let me set this to grid, and then flip back to the output, and notice this changed live. So
live?
Yeah, live. So now I've got this horizontal scrolling list of all of the items instead of the vertical list that I had before. So that's the list view, and there are a lot of different list views. You can see things such as the fact that a list view will allow you to grab items and change their order. So that's pretty powerful. That's something that you don't have to do on your own. Let me set that there. There we go. You can use cell spanning, so you can actually make things so that the list is asynchronous. It doesn't just look like a huge list of the same exact sized things. A lot of these demos are available in CodeShow under the list view demo, by the way.
Okay.
We've got semantic zoom and the ability to take one of these lists and zoom out and show, in this case, decades as opposed to just years. So notice I've got 40, 41, 42, 43. I've got all the years in 40, but if I zoom out with a pinch, instead of an optical zoom where everything gets smaller, instead it's semantically zoomed. So now I have a higher logical view of the data that I'm actually looking at. That's the semantic zoom. That's enabled in WinJS.
Nice.
And in all of these cases, in all of these controls, let me jump back there. We're running out of examples here, but it'll let you know if we're running into any issues in the other browsers. So for instance, here's a GitHub issue 21 where the list view reordering causes the hover rectangle to get animated in Firefox. That's an issue, and it's being worked on, but this is kind of all being done in transparency here. And if you go to the bottom of, like if you just go to buildwinjs.com, not the try, but just to the bottom of buildwinjs, you'll find a link to, oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong site. I'll show you that in just a little bit, actually. So let's go back to try. There's one more I want to show you. I want to show you the hub. The hub is a really cool control that you've probably until this point only ever seen inside of a Windows 8 app. But here I can click on output and it'll actually go full screen. And now remember, I'm on a website here and I'm viewing a hub in my website. Now let's go ahead and choose a little bit fancier hub that has a hero image in it. Bam, there we go. I've got a hero image in my hub. And if I hit F11 in Internet Explorer here and view this full screen, I'm not sure why that didn't work. F11. It's not listening to me. Listen to me. Anyway, we'll imagine that it worked.
Go to F11, go back.
Go back?
Yeah, and do it here. No?
No, it's still not working. That was a good idea. Interesting. Well, maybe we'll submit that as an issue. All right, so we've got ourselves a hero image, and we've got the rest of this hub running on the web. Super, super cool there. Now, notice that I also have the ability to allow this hub to lay itself out vertically, I should say. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit output here, and then this looks like what we've been looking at. It looks very horizontal, if you ask me. But I'm going to not minimize, but restore my browser window. And now watch this. I'm going to resize this browser. I'm going to go narrower, and now this thing automatically takes a vertical orientation. Okay, so there it is, and now I pan up in order to see all the contents of this.
Sweet.
Pretty great. And this is the WinJS library. This is available for you to use whether you're creating a Windows 8 app or not. You can just use that in a website. So we have the potential for doing a whole lot of code reuse here, not just across apps, but also across apps and your website. So pretty great opportunity to really create a consistent brand. Nice. One of the things I'll say about WinJS, it's really good at playing well with the other platforms. So we'll look at, we've got a little surprise down the road here, but it's really good at allowing you to use your Angular or use your Bootstrap or your Backbone or whatever other libraries you happen to be using. It plays well with others. That's important.
Cool.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. We're talking about underscore. Underscore is a pretty straightforward, not a whole lot of words have to be said about underscore. It's basically a utility library. It gives you a whole bunch of tools in your tool belt as a JavaScript developer. There are a lot of things that kind of feel like they're missing in JavaScript. They're not written in the core language. And underscore backfills a lot of those. I made some examples of this in, we were right there. There's an underscore demo in CodeShow, and I just grabbed a few of the things that I use on a daily basis from underscore. And those are map, reduce, find, filter, every, and sum. And all I'm doing is I'm looking at some, this is the JavaScript over here, and I'm looking at the, for instance, the map demo here. So the map demo takes this list of 5 numbers, 1 through 5, and it uses the underscore dot map. That's the name of this map function in underscore. That's why we call it the underscore language, because we use an underscore to reference it. Underscore dot map. We're going to pass in 1 through 5, and with each of those values, we're going to return the number and the word chicken or chickens, depending on whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So let's go look at this one and see how it did it. Aha, 1 chicken, 2 chickens, 3 chickens, did it correctly. Okay, so I mapped that to a pluralization using a pluralization algorithm. I can also take these 5 numbers and do something with them like a reduce function, where I take the 5 numbers and I add each to the next until I come up with the result of 15. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. I can look in there for the number 4. I can filter for everything greater than 4. And I can use every and some, which are analogous to the, oh gosh, my mind is drawing a blank. In C#, what are those called? It's a quiz for Michael.
I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. What are those things called? I don't know.
In C#, we have LINQ, which is a tremendous library, and it offers us any and all. There they are. Any and all. You should have been able to read my mind.
I didn't know.
Any and all will tell us if any or all of the items in the list pass some predicate that you pass in, and that's exactly what every and some do. So that's the underscore library. It's really all we need to say about it. It's super simple and super helpful. So you saw underscore. Let's have a little chat about Backbone, because it's really popular. Underscore, very constrained, this is all it does. It's just a utility library. Backbone, it's not at all like that. Backbone is a beast. It's a big one. People use Backbone to create their entire website. They create a huge dependency on Backbone and say, we are going to use Backbone as our underlying framework. And that's because Backbone implements a strong pattern in your site or in your app. It implements the very popular MVP pattern, and also helps you to create your app as a SPA app, as a single-page application app, so that you're not navigating around from one page to the other. It's all happening on one page, and things are just getting rendered on that page. Interesting, the authors of Backbone are also the authors of CoffeeScript and underscore, so those guys keep busy. They drink a lot of coffee.
Yes.
Backbone is very lightweight. It's good at kind of staying out of the way and not being a real heavy underlying layer. So that's always encouraging to hear. It does have one strong dependency, just one, and that is underscore. So if you have Backbone, you need underscore. That's a no-brainer, no problem there. And the easiest way to come up to speed on Backbone, in my opinion, is to look for, or when you get this slide deck, just click on the annotated source for this to-do app. I'm going to jump out to that. And this Jerome, who created this, must be brilliant. The idea of creating the code on one side and description on the other, but keeping them synchronized is excellent. He talks you all the way through the creation of the model, the collection, the view, and finally the application to tie it all together for creating the ubiquitous to-do application using Backbone. So this is an excellent way to learn Backbone, in my opinion. Okay. We won't dive any deeper into Backbone than that, but next I want to give a mention to Knockout. Knockout is a little bit less prescriptive, not necessarily a huge underlying framework, but still good at allowing you to implement SPA and templating in your application. It's pretty much simpler than Backbone, and it does, like I say, implement SPA and templating. So Knockout is really wonderful. The people that use it end up loving it. So
cool.
Next, we've got jQuery. Why don't you talk to us about jQuery?
All right, yeah, we could switch it over
Maybe a few people have heard of it.
Yeah, so it was a pleasure to take this one on, because jQuery is a very popular library that is used by so many individuals. So many developers have, I would say jQuery, I'll even credit jQuery, the library, to probably re-energizing the entire JavaScript community because it took care of all of the little grunt work things that we just absolutely hated doing as JavaScript developers. And all of us seem to have created our own little libraries, but jQuery was one of those that stood out where it was just done so well. So I know it's not just one guy, but we do know there was one guy who started it all. So hats off for the jQuery library. So if we look at my screen, we'll see that I took this. I thought the best way to describe jQuery is, of course, to go right to the source. This is a little screen capture. And when it says, what is jQuery? The bottom line is they do consider it themselves as a library. And you'll notice that I even paused when I said, I almost wanted to say framework, but it's a library. That's all it is. It's a library. It makes it very easy for you to have instant traversal of an HTML document. I think the thing that I personally was attracted to the most, and you'll see this when I do the demo, is that jQuery did not invent another language. It fully capitalized on CSS selectors for us to do the DOM manipulation and traversal. Because what I was heavily involved with, in fact, I'm a published author on some XML books, and one of the things that I was passionate about back in the day was XPath. And I really enjoyed XPath because XPath would help me traverse through an XML document. Well, I could also apply that thinking to an HTML document as long as it was a well-formed one. But it was another language. But we already have CSS. We already know how to find and use selectors, as we've learned about all day. So why not use, and that's the brilliance behind jQuery, is the notion of using a selector to find the things in the HTML document. And even though it's not for CSS, we're using the same kind of thinking that CSS does. I just think that's brilliant. So when it says it's compliant with CSS, it truly is, and in fact, not only compliant, but really complements it as well, because it's using all that mentality that so many developers who get involved with the web, they already know it. So very, very nice. So I am going to CodePen, and I am going to showcase jQuery through a little thing that I wrote in CodePen. I'm going to have fun doing this. So why don't we go over there right now? It's this one right here. And here is the demo. So for starters, I think what I'm going to do is just say that there's quite a bit of HTML in here. I did this intentionally because if we're going to be talking about how well it can go through and examine your document, I wanted to have several scenarios that I could look at. I wanted to have lots of IDs, lots of classes, a lot of things that I could go ahead and showcase. So this is like instant training on demand using some of this fun HTML stuff. Then I want you to also see that with regard to CSS, I have involved some classes. So I get down, yeah, so I have like a secret class. I have, let's see, there we go. Content class, smaller, action, author. So I got a lot of different classes in here as well. But where the magic of jQuery is, of course, since we are talking about JavaScript, is what is in the JavaScript. So I'm going to showcase to you what's going on here, and then we're going to see it in action. And then I get to, once again, put Jeremy Foster in the hot seat. I'm going to ask him to think about a few things, and we're going to do some dynamic investigation of the document on the fly using CodePen, and I guarantee you he has no idea what I'm talking about right now. So that makes it much more fun. So let's go back over here and talk about some of the basics. First of all, I want you to know that in CodePen, over here, there's this little, looks like a configuration thing. And when I click on it, you'll notice that it gives you the ability to say, what do you want to include in this? So part of using jQuery or any of the other libraries we've talked about so far is that you need to include it in your application or your page somehow. So what's nice about CodePen is it says, oh, you don't have to write the script to go find the source. We'll just do it for you. So go ahead and just, choose jQuery, which is what I did. So the reason why jQuery is working is because I did this. I didn't do this on my other ones. It's just on this one. So now that I've explained that, now we could talk about the essence of jQuery. This is the static representation of jQuery, the $sign. Just like underscore uses underscore, jQuery uses this $sign because it is a valid naming token in JavaScript, so you could use it as the beginning of a name. We kind of don't think of symbols like that sometimes, but it is a valid naming token. And so with this, you could also take this whole thing and just put the word jQuery, and that would be the same thing. Mm-hmm. So it's just an abbreviation for jQuery. Now we're saying I'm passing into that jQuery object or function the document. Now this is a selector. This isn't a CSS selector, but it's a special kind of selector. It's a jQuery selector. In most cases, it's going to use CSS style selectors. But in this case, we're saying when the document is ready, what do you want to do? So initializing when the document is ready to go for us to start manipulating it is a big factor. I mean, a lot of people did it so many different ways on the web, and jQuery kind of standardized it and just made it very simple. So there you go. You have that ready function. So it's saying when it's ready, go ahead and do this. Well, I am starting to call these functions called WriteLine. So let me show you what WriteLine is. WriteLine is a function I wrote, and I said put any HTML in there you want. I'm going to say find the thing that has the, what do you think that means there?
Looks to me like a ID.
That's right.
Selector.
There is something on that page that has an ID of output. So I'm grabbing that. jQuery returns a jQuery object.
So we're using CSS syntax here. We're not using CSS, but we're stealing the syntax.
Brilliantly said. That's exactly. We're stealing again. I love it. So we're stealing that syntax, although this has nothing to do with CSS at this time. It's the same selector syntax. Once we have that, now it's important to understand that if I did document.getElementById, what that would return would be different than what this returns. jQuery always returns a jQuery object, whereas document.getElementById would return an actual DOM element. The reason why it's an advantage to return a jQuery object is because the jQuery object has functions on it that are standard across everything. So you could start calling some very standardized functions, and once you get to learn them, they're really cool. So in this particular example, I'm going to say I want to say with the HTML, it's going to equal what's ever currently in it plus what I'm about to add to it, and then put a line break. So that everyone who's watching can understand, I'm going to scroll down to the output, and I just want you to see that what's in red is my output. So each of these is one of those outputs that has that line break. And what I'm doing in this whole particular demo is about saying, let me pass in some selectors, and let's find out how many matches we get in this entire thing. So, oh, Jeremy's asking me, have you ever seen star before? Yes, I've seen star. I did, and I'm using it in my demo. So I got 60 matches, but check this one out. What does this one mean then?
I think I saw you adding that on the break.
Yeah, it's a lie. I had it way before the break. Then we have body space asterisk. So that would mean what, Jeremy? If it's the space combiner thingy that you called it.
Everything under body.
That's
all
right.
Under body.
So apparently there's 4 things above body. Mm-hmm. And then we have the div, and we have the comma there, which says I want to get all divs, and that's kind of an and. You know, in this saying, give me divs and paragraph tags, where this one's saying, give me all paragraph tags that are direct children of divs. So I get to see all these matches. It's kind of cool. So now that we understand that, we could go up here and start to create our own. Like, for example, let's go look at the HTML. Let's take a brief look at it. And if you start to see any tags or something in there that's interesting, let's figure out how we're going to query for it and see how many instances of it there are. So there's a few possibilities. I'm going to go back over to the JavaScript, maximize that. And do you think there's anything that would be worth trying to find?
Let's try to find all the LIs.
all the LIs. So I'll copy this line here, Control C. I'm going to Control V, and I'm going to say, how would I find all LIs in this document? What would I type here? Just LI, you're right. Give me all LIs. That's all I have to do. Now, if I scroll down and look at my output, I'm going to see that it has 8 matches. So jQuery, and the reason why I wanted to do the demo this way was really to highlight the thing that I was passionate about. And I was passionate about, I love how jQuery used CSS selector type syntax to help me to easily just get involved. I didn't have to learn anything else that I didn't already know. If you're a CSS developer, you're already there. You just have to start applying what you're already thinking. You grab these things, and then it has really simple ways for you to modify, manipulate, traverse. Everything that you'd want to do as far as manipulating the DOM is very easy to do with that jQuery library.
I'd like to add that in ECMAScript 5, the query selector and query selector all functions were added so that you're able to say, you're able to use those on any DOM element, including documents. So you can do document query selector, and it does something very similar. You pass it a CSS selector, and it finds you all the element or the elements that match. And then jQuery, once ECMAScript 5 was prominent, then jQuery just adopts that, and so it says now if you use exactly what Michael was showing you, it'll use query selector under the covers.
That's right.
Unless you're in a browser that doesn't support it, and then it'll fall back nicely. So it's good at figuring out which version you're on.
Yeah, and that was another plus to it, is it did so much to help with the whole code forking in this direction, in this direction, in this direction, because we're always worried about what if this and what if that. It kind of did all that for you so you could just start using stuff.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful library. I'm going to switch over now to something different. It's kind of interesting how when we start talking about new topics, so if we can go over to this intro, it's on Angular. And so far, all of the named things that we've talked about in this particular module, there's always a reason why they're named the way that they are, right? So we're going to talk about Angular in more depth and understand a few things about it and what it is. Because we want to be able to say precisely what something is. Like, I loved how you were talking about Knockout and Backbone and say, well, you use it for this, or this can help you with SPA, or this can help you with that. Well, when it comes to Angular, it's kind of interesting. It's interesting. So let's go back and let's dive into it. So in quotes at the top, it says, HTML enhanced for web apps. So that's their tagline, their slogan. That's what they're saying, enhanced HTML. Now, let's read a little further. HTML is great for declaring static documents, but it falters when we try to use it for declaring dynamic views in web applications. AngularJS lets you extend HTML vocabulary for your application. The resulting environment is extraordinarily expressive, readable, and quick to develop. Now, that's a quote from themselves, but the bottom line is, it helped me to appreciate why you can't label Angular as it's a this type of thing, because it is very broad in that it extends HTML. So I thought what I would do next is, notice that the title of this slide is Angular. You know, what? We got Angular. We got AngularJS, we got Angular.js, and the answer is, yeah, whatever. Yeah, call it what you want. You'll even find that on their own website. If you go to the frequently asked questions, it's not showing on the screen here because this is a little snapshot, but they'll initially call it, like you'll see here, you'll see it's like, okay, they clearly used here at this point, they used AngularJS as a name. If you scroll down more, you'll start seeing they just call it Angular. So if you're starting to say, well, which one should I call it? It's like whatever you want to call it. And so I'm calling it Angular. And in fact, in a lot of cases, I've seen they're kind of going down the route where I've seen with HTML5 and now just calling it HTML. It's kind of the same thing. You know, everyone just kind of knows it as Angular, so we don't have to put the JS at the end. But if you do that, you're not committing any crime because that's how it was originally named. So why is it called AngularJS? Because it uses Angular brackets, as you'll see. Why does it have ng everywhere in its namespaces? Because ng sounds like Angular. That's why.
That's a stretch in my opinion.
That is a stretch, but that is the reason, right? Is it a library, a framework, a plugin, or a browser extension? A lot of the other ones have been easy to identify. They think that framework fits the best, although they think it's more lightweight than a framework. It's a pretty bold statement. It's like, we're a framework, but we're as lightweight as a library. But in a way, it's kind of true. Is it a templating system? It does look like one, but again, you can't just label it. So that's what was kind of fun about Angular, is you can't really label it as it's the this thing. Can it do two-way binding? Absolutely. Can it do templating? Yes. Can it enhance the HTML with things you never knew that you could do? Yes. So it's different, but it's popular, and it's increasing in popularity every single day. So it's worth mentioning. Let's go ahead and take a look at a demo of using Angular in the web. I'm going to go to the Angular demo on the Modern Web Platform demos, and I will focus foremost. Well, first of all, let me focus on this. Let me just show that, yes, I went here and I said, give me the latest version of Angular. We talked about that with jQuery, so it's already included. So notice there's no script over here. That's kind of important. There's no script other than just including that file for what you're about to see. So I can maximize the HTML now. And here are, this is classic. This is Angular bracket thingies.
Those are actually curly braces.
But they're Angular, aren't they?
No, the angles are the angle braces, the greater than, less than.
So despite the challenges that we're having as presenters, this is what Angular is calling Angular type brackets.
Ah, all right.
And this is a very popular part of their syntax. So when you start to see that in play, that's part of the whole Angular movement, is that this is now embedded right into our HTML. You can see I'm putting it in here. Now, if you look at the output at the bottom, it's like, so what are we buying ourselves here? Seeing Angular brackets on the screen. And the answer is, it's my way of reminding everyone who gets started with this to not forget the most important thing you should do when you start using Angular. And that is what's in this comment up here at the top. Did I put the ng-app in my HTML element? Oh, wait a minute, I'm in CodePen. How am I going to do it? Well, I can just go to the HTML right here, and I can add a class to the HTML. So what that really means is I can add an attribute. I could just say ng-. Now, as I type app, start looking at the output below. Whoa! What's the deal? So let's go figure out what's happening. When I put name here, we don't see anything appearing, but when I said presenters, notice that I did an initialization of presenters equals Michael and Jeremy, and then I did down below repeat for every P in presenters. Now, I just made this up, I could have called this foo in presenters, but then I would need to use that same name here when I'm saying, what am I repeating? Very cool stuff. So, of course, if I were to add another name, give me another name here, Jeremy.
How about Fred?
Fred. That got you in trouble before. But voila, we see Fred. We just didn't say what the last name was, and so we're good. So we have our three. Instant, but two-way binding? Is it possible? How about this? Yes, it is. Literally, all I had to do was indicate what the model was by name, and that is what is showing up here at the top. We could do some crazy things. For example, I could take this whole syntax, or I could just type it again. I'm going to do another HR. And I can cruise in here and say, you know what? I'm really interested right now in knowing what 4 plus 16 plus 18 plus 99 is. See, I instant gratification on the screen. I can find out even mathematical equations. So, we don't have a lot of time to go into all these different type of libraries into great detail, but what I loved about this demo was to say, can you start to see what the possibilities are? How quickly you could start using this templating model, how minimalistic it was on the screen. I mean, you had to do very little. I didn't even have any JavaScript. I mean, I didn't even have to do any custom JavaScript to get a dynamic list going, to get two-way binding going, to do some mathematical stuff. It was very easy to do, and the syntax is really clean. So I think that's why you see a lot of people embracing it. And I can tell you, I barely scratched the surface. We didn't even get to talk about the whole MVVM structure, where how we can have models that are not scoped to the global like I was just doing, but you can have separate types and you can bring them all down. It's really, really cool way to do some web stuff. And on that note, I am going to say Jeremy has something he'd like to share. This kind of ties into something that we did at the beginning. So I'm going to talk to Jeremy now.
Yeah, so the first library that we showed you was WinJS. We told you that it works well with other libraries. Angular is one of the libraries it works well with. And all it really took was a small shim that was written. And you can go to, if you go ahead and look at my screen, you can go to github.com, CodeMonkeyChris, Angular-WinJS. That's the reference to where the code lives. This is a small shim that is written for WinJS that will allow you to utilize this terse Angular syntax. So if you look at the syntax on the left side of your screen, we've got the default WinJS syntax where, like I was showing you before, we have a div tag with a data win control, and that is what turns this into a hub control. And then we have multiple hub sections, and each of those are declared the same way, data win control, and their options are this extended this extra attribute where all of their options are included in what looks like JSON syntax. Well, all of that is replaced by when you use Angular and when you use this shim, it's replaced by this syntax where the hub now just becomes WinHub, and a section becomes WinHub section, and each of its attributes, or each of the properties for it, become just attributes on that WinHub section element. So it's arguably a much more terse way to write the same exact thing. And so if you're kind of in Angular mode and this is the way you're used to writing things, then bam, you plug that shim in and you are golden.
That is very cool. So that's all I had on that one, but I think that was really exciting to see how those even all tied in with WinJS at the end. That was very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope you see when you look at all these libraries that you have in front of you that the choice is not easy as far as which one to use. You just kind of have to figure out what kind of a project are you making. Is it big? Is it small? Is it broad? Is it pretty narrow? And which of these libraries is going to work well for you? Look at some of the samples of the libraries. Look at which ones really just kind of make sense and resonate with you and the kind of developer that you are. Let's look at another one. Bootstrap is a little bit different. Bootstrap is actually not so much it's not really a framework, it's not a back end at all, it's a front end framework. That's what they're calling it. I would consider it more like a library. But I guess, yeah, it's kind of a UI framework in that you create this strong dependency. Your UI has this strong dependency on Bootstrap, and that's what it does, is it controls your UI and helps you to make the UI easy. The folks at Twitter created this. It's made up of HTML and CSS components, but there's an optional JavaScript component that does some other fancy stuff as well to make it even more responsive, even more functional. So this encourages a really consistent UI set of features and naming conventions that has some really distinct advantages. One of them is that you're able to go to sites like, I believe it's Bootswatch. I'll type it here so I can figure out if I'm right about that. It is, in fact, Bootswatch that says, hey, if you're using Bootstrap, we know what your UI model is, what your convention is, and so we can show you a whole bunch of Bootstrap themes. Let me go to themes. Look like they moved it around a little bit here. We can give you all these themes. You can just download it, plug it in, and then all of a sudden your website's going to look like this. Okay? And some of these look significantly different. And as long as you're following the Bootstrap method, then whenever you download this CSS file and drop it in, all of a sudden your website's going to look significantly different. So that's what Bootstrap is. one of the things that it does is it discourages the separation of concerns between structure and style. It's maybe one of the controversial aspects to Bootstrap. I tend to shy away from Bootstrap just because, yeah, it really does kind of make me drop a lot of stylistic stuff into my HTML, into my structure, and don't always like that. But boy, sometimes you just can't argue with the speed at which it would get you up to a working website. You can jump out to Bootstrap's website at getbootstrap.com, and you can look at some of the examples of sites that are created in this. And one of the things I want to show you is that if I take one of these sites and open it here, and then I restore my browser, drop that down, you can see that it has, notice my navigation bar says home, about, contact, drop downs. If my browser gets too narrow, that turns into a hamburger menu. Did you see that? Now all of a sudden I have this hamburger menu up at the top right. Nice. Instead of, let me expand it a little bit, instead of a full navigation. Okay? Let me keep getting narrower. And you'll see that not only does all my text wrap, but all of my objects get progressively smaller. And this becomes progressively more of a site that looks like it was designed for a small vertical browser in mind. So one of the great things about Bootstrap is you just go bam, plug it in, and you've automatically got a responsive site.
Cool.
So that's pretty great. Let's go ahead and move on to the last library. Here we are at the very end. The last library that I want to show you is called D3. It stands for Data-Driven Documents. Raise your hand if you've heard of D3. D3 is, most of the time when I ask at an event if people have heard of D3, they say, no, never heard of D3. What's that? Few have. I think kind of the I don't know, the visual geeks like D3. It's a really cool library for visualizing. Okay? And if you jump out to D3, you'll see that there are a whole lot of really cool examples. What it is, essentially, is a library for manipulating documents that are based on data. Okay? So you might have big data, you might have huge data, and you want to visualize that in HTML, and D3 is really good at that transformation. For instance, if on a really simple example, if you just have an array of numbers and you want that to become a table, this would do it, but it would do a whole lot more than that. On their GitHub site, you'll find a big enumeration of their examples. You can really geek out on these. They're super awesome. Look how many there are. There's just a whole lot of them. And what I've done is I've just kind of collected a few of the ones that I think are cool, and hopefully you will too. Let's look at collision detection. Collision detection, I'm using my finger on the screen here. I'm just tapping around, and it's detecting that, and all of these little particles are moving away from it. Now, that's kind of a cool visual effect. You see that, elsewhere, so it might not be impressive until you think about the fact that this, in JavaScript, each of these particles could be based on elements of your data. The color could be meaningful, the size could be meaningful, and the position of these on the screen and what they're attracted to or repelled from might be meaningful. So there could be some cool things that you would do with that, and all you have to do is basically plug it in and you're ready to go. Let's look at this stacked bars chart. This one's kind of neat. It's a concept I hadn't seen before. It's basically taking a typical stacked graph and saying, well, we might want to stack it or we might want to group it. So here we are in grouped, and if I switch to stacked, watch the animation. All of those group elements slide up, slide into place, and it transforms into a stacked chart. So that visual effect might be just what you're looking for.
Cool.
Let's look at this life expectancy of various parts of the world over time. And these are all these lines that might be difficult to grok until you hover over them and you go, oh yeah, I can see exactly what that is. And once again, transforming data into something that's visually meaningful. I think that's a really, really fun space. Let's look at the wind history. This one asks you if it's allowed to get your geolocation, just like we were asking. It's already asked me, and I've approved, so that's why it told me. But let me go ahead and just zoom in here a little bit.
Now, what are all those things on the map?
So those dots are all weather stations.
Okay.
Okay, so those are weather stations that are constantly measuring the wind. Let me go ahead and, I wonder if I can zoom in here. There we go. Now, this is showing me the weather stations at a few places around where I am here in the Pacific Northwest. And right now, I click on January, and it's showing me what the typical wind direction and speed is. This is important for me because I'm a sailor, so I always want to know where the wind is. But then in February, it shifts just a little bit. And in March, it shifts just a little bit. I can just hit play, and it will change that over time and show me around the year what time or what direction the wind is typically from. And I can actually pause that, and I can grab multiple months, and it'll give me an aggregate of where the wind is altogether. So super cool there. Now what I've done is I've shown you 4 cool D3 examples. Now I'm going to show you that I've dragged a few more into CodeShow, and you can find those by just searching for D3. I think you'll find these in the version that you have because it's been in there for a little while. And I think that those are available under a simple search for D3. There we go. There are 4 of them that I brought in. And one of them is a complete rendering of the state of Alaska, where I'm from. This is not a PNG or a JPEG, even though I could have cheated and just dropped a picture in there. This is actually taking a bunch of data. You can see this Alaska JavaScript file has these data points that it pulls in from a file that you won't actually see in my code rendering here. And then the D3 library itself is included. Oh, here it is, topo.js. I think this is the data, or maybe not. No, this is a support library. And then our HTML, very simple. Our JavaScript, Alaska.js, this is where the D3 stuff happens. And these examples I pulled off of D3's website and brought into CodeShow, and it was a very simple process. It took me like 5 minutes to translate each of these. Because what we're doing is we're looking at all of this data, and we're projecting it, rendering it as SVG objects, and drawing this path in a custom manner. You can see this is where I customized it, basically used the WinJS XHR in order to fetch this Alaska data JSON file. And it drew the state of Alaska right there. All right, let's look at 2 more. One of them is a chord diagram. I have no idea what a chord diagram is, but I thought this looked cool, so I brought it in. There we go. And finally, the force-directed graph. This is a force-directed graph. I thought this looked really neat. Once again, imagine that this is meaningful data in your app. And so each of these points really represents something, and the lines represent relationships. Now I can drag this sucker around, interact with my data, and I did all of this without having to write any of it because it's just available to me on the web. So, and that's the same thing with all these libraries that we're talking about in this section. All this stuff is just available to you on the web. If you go to, I believe I have this on a slide for you. Yes, here we go. If you go to codefoster.com/JSLibraries, let's go there together real quick. Codefoster.com JSLibraries. You'll find a blog post that I did where I have a post. I have a list of a few different really nice enumerations of various JavaScript libraries. And if, for instance, you go to micro.js, you're going to find this gigantic, I could scroll forever, list of a whole bunch of little tiny JavaScript libraries that each do something different. Here's a pub sub, here's a polyfill for timing, here's a micro library to fade elements in and out. Wonderful. All kinds of options there for me. I really like this last one. I just added it recently, a list of really useful JavaScript libraries. This one has a lot of really good info. A lot of really good libraries that are included on it, all kind of organized well, very curated. So cool. I hope that's really helpful for you. We're coming up on the end of the module altogether. What do you think, Michael? Do you think we've covered some good ground?
Yeah, I think it's exciting. It gives us an opportunity to reflect and say, this day was really fun talking about the overview of the modern web platform. I'm really excited for the next 2 days. I hope you can join us if possible as we dive even deeper into some of these areas as it relates to universal apps. So using these technologies, but using them to build phone and Windows apps. So I think that's going to be great. And so really appreciate all the attendees today, all the people who've been helping on the chats and getting all their Q&A taken care of. We really appreciate that a lot. I think it's been a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to remind everybody that all of this stuff that you learn in the modern web platform and all the stuff that you might already know as web developers, all that stuff moves right into the world of creating client apps for Windows and Windows Phone. And in fact, what our course tomorrow is going to be on is creating universal apps. So that means that you write or even just import some JavaScript that somebody else has written, and you create your application, and it works on the phone, it works on the device, on the Windows devices, the tablets and desktops and everything. And it doesn't work like it does on a lot of platforms where it's wrapped in a browser and constrained significantly. It runs native. You have full access to the device. You have full performance. Very, very cool. So I really hope you guys will join us for the next 2 days. Thank you so much for sticking with us today. I do hope that it was thorough, and I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation. You can always find us on social media and ask any questions you want.
Sure. Or also help out. I think there's a survey. So if you could also fill that out as well, we'd really appreciate that. So get going with that. And any last comments?
No, that's it. Everybody jump out to Twitter, use the #MSMVA tag, and give us some love on Twitter. That'd be fun.
Especially his picture.
Yeah, maybe just start a new tweet.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Okay. See everybody tomorrow on the next course.